I want to tell you a story, which is an interesting story. It's a poignant story. It's a moving story. It's a serious story. It's a disturbing story. The Rebbe Rashab, the Rebbe Nishmosei Eden, passed away Beis Nisan Tov Reish Pei, the second day of the month of Nisan in the year 1920, in Rostov. He was sick for about a week. When you read the story of his histalkus, I've discussed this on previous occasions, it becomes very, very clear that this man wrote his own ticket. He decided it was time to go, so he went. He spent a week writing a will, a tzavah. His will is very scholarly. Most people have never seen his will. It's in the Rebbe's library, apparently. And as soon as he finished writing the tzavah, that Friday night he didn't feel well. Berel Rivkin describes Nashkafta the Rebbe, it was 2, 3 in the morning, and I think he saw the Rebbetzin going with a glass of water, and he asked her where she's going. She said, "The Zayde Filt Nishkut." The following Motzei Shabbos, 8 days later, he was nostalgic. During that week, he got sicker. They brought doctors. And his reaction, they asked him if he wants to see a doctor. You want to bring a doctor, bring a doctor. But his body language said, doctors are not going to help me. It's a tzaddik gomora, a rebbe. If this is what he wants, this is what he wants. In any case, one of the things that happened during that week incessantly and repeatedly, and Berel Rivkin, Harav Berel Rivkin in the Sefer Hashkafta, the Rebbe references it over and over again, is he kept on asking if he has typhus. Typhoid fever was an epidemic, a contagion that could not be controlled. At that time, they had no cure for it. Many people would die. And the Rebbe kept on asking if he has typhus, because he did not want to pass away from typhus. In the Sefer Hashkafta the Rebbe, if I recall correctly, it doesn't say why. It just says the Rebbe kept on asking if he has typhus. He doesn't want to pass away from typhus. In Yudel Chitrik Sefer, I believe, I'm almost sure, Rishimus Dvarim, there's a reprinted version now, a big volume. And if the Chitriks are listening, Maaseh Bichlech is supposed to read in bed. You're holding a Shas Gemara in bed is not very convenient. And when it smashes into your nose and breaks your glasses when you fall asleep, it's most uncomfortable. But in any case, in Yudel Chitrik Sefer, he adds a detail, why he didn't want to pass away from typhus. And this is remarkable. That winter, the Rebbe Rashab hosted, as a Machneseirach, the Gon and Chassid, Rabbi Yitzchak Yel Rafalovich. Harav Yitzchak Yel Rafalovich was the Kremenchuger Rav. He was a Rav for maybe 60 years, for a very, very, very long time. He was Mamala Makem Choisnai. His father-in-law was a Goan Eilam, a Goan Nadir, by the name of Rabbi Yosef Tamarkin. He passed away in the 1870s during the Nesias of the Reb Marash. When he was nostalgic, the Reb Marash appointed his son-in-law, who was probably less than 30, to be Rav in Kremenchuk, which was an incredible coup because Kremenchuk was a very large city with many Jews, many kinds of Jews. And there was a Lubavitcher Rav, and he was a Rav forever, from the 1870s into the 1930s, Mr. He moved, 1920s, he moved to Eretz Yisrael and he lived more years. He passed away, I think, in 1937. He lived a very long time. But in 1920, he was hosted by the Rebbe Rashab Al Tzerech. He was Mustama older than the Rebbe Rashab, but he was the Chassid, the Rebbe Rashab was the Rebbe, and he had typhus. He was sick. And the Rebbe Rashab insisted on hosting him. And of course, he recovered and lived another 15 or 16 or 17 years. A few months later, the Rebbe Rashab himself was infected with the disease. And the reason that Rebbe Rashab did not want to pass away from typhus, because if he would pass away from typhus, that would mean that because he did a mitzvah, he got sick and passed away. And it cannot be, from a mitzvah, a person should suffer. This is what he writes. Let's say that again. Let's try that one more time, yeah? At the Rebbe Rashab hosted Rabbi Yitzchak Rafalovich, who had typhus. He himself recovered from the illness and lived many, many more years. If the Rebbe Nishmosei had caught the illness from him and had passed away, So it turns out that because he was machnas eirech, he passed away, and it's impossible that he should do a mitzvah and suffer. This is the story. Now the Rebbe Rashab passed away, but not from typhus. Now what strikes you about the story? What strikes you about the story is that I know many people who've done mitzvahs and suffered for it. There's an old expression that says, no good deed goes unpunished. We know stories of Chassidim Balei Mesiras Nefesh for Yiddishkeit who paid the ultimate price for their Mesiras Nefesh. Bepashtas. In other words, they were dedicated to spreading Yiddishkeit and spreading Torah and doing mitzvahs and fakert. The schad that they got for it was Mesiras Nefesh, al Kiddush Hashem, or diseases or illness and so forth. Now, of course, the immediate answer to that question is we don't know the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We don't understand the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's beyond us. But another answer, which I guess on some level should be very disturbing, as I told you, the story is amongst other things disturbing, is there's different levels of Yidden. And depending on the level of Yid, that is the extent to which the relationship between Teva HaGashmi, the physical nature and the physical world, and a person's Avodas Hashem is. In other words, the bigger tzaddik you are, the more the reality of Torah is manifest in the reality of the world. And apparently, by the Rebbe Rashab, it wasn't shayech begashmis. It wasn't physically possible. He should do a mitzvah and suffer for it. By another person, it could happen, and you'd have to have an explanation and so forth. In other words, although it's the Torah, when the Gemara says that you're doing a mitzvah, you cannot suffer, shlucha mitzvah in izaykin, and so on and so forth, it says for everybody. Nevertheless, it's possible that still it shouldn't work out so perfectly, so ideally. When a person's on a higher madrega, as a Rebbe Nishma, as a Neshama Klolos, in his case, it cannot be, he should do a mitzvah and should come from it a punishment, an ill effect. Certainly not an ill effect of Hepech HaChayim. And like I said, this is disturbing because usually we're not told these Gemara with asterisks. You're not told Shluchim mitzvah ein nezaykin if you're the Rebbe Rashab. Shluchim mitzvah ein nezaykin if you're such and such a chassid. From Nocha Maise to the Santa Maise, with this is in the sefer called the Ishalei Nichna from Rabbi Lezer Nanas Alav Hashem Zachreinei Levracha. That he himself writes it in his book, or he told the story. The Rebbe Rashab made him a shliach to go someplace in 1919, 1920. And there was a period of total anarchy, no government at all. And the anti-Semitism was rampant. And one of the shtick that the anti-Semites had was that they would kill Jews at random. And if they found a Jew on a train, they would throw him off the train as the train was moving at full throttle. And they would mamish, like it says in the Siddur, about the Azazel, Evarim Rahman al-Islam. And the Rebbe Rashab calls in Lezer Nanas, who was, I believe, was a Bacher at the time, and he sends him on a shlichus, and he was very afraid. The Rebbe sends you on a shlichus, you go on a shlichus. But at the last moment, he couldn't resist. He went back into the Rebbe and said, Rebbe, I'm afraid it's a sakana. Ich far alein, I'm traveling alone, I want a brach. So the Rebbe Rashab looks at him and says to him, a Yid fort kemel nicht alein. A Jew travels never alone. Whoever the he goes, the Eibishter goes with him. And what happened? He's sitting on the train, and they had these were overnight trains, so they had their own bunks. And a group of Russians are talking about him in his presence. A Jid, a Jew, a Yevrei. They're going to throw him off the train. The problem is the train was going up a hill, which meant that it was going slowly. And they all decided when the train is going to go on the opposite side of the hill and it's going to accelerate, then they'll throw him out and they'll watch his body come apart. Rachmana litzlan. And he's laying on his bunk thinking, okay, they'll see this. And as these goyim are waiting to get to the top of the hill and dropped on the opposite side, an old Russian screams out, wait a minute. He hates Trotsky and we hate Trotsky. So the enemy of my enemy is my friend. In other words, these were Russians who were not in support of the communist revolution. Trotsky was labeled Trotsky, was a Jewish fellow. He was a big communist. And the fact that he was a Jew and nevertheless hated Trotsky made him favorable to these Russian peasants. And he says he hates Trotsky and we hate Trotsky, so we're friends. And that was it, that they didn't kill him. In other words, the Eibishter gevadim at them. The Eibishter traveled with it. Now I want to ask you a question. You need to hear from the Rebbe Rashab that the Eibishter travels with you. Isn't it true always? A Yid fort kemel nicht allein. But it's different. We all understand that it's different. And we know that it's different. How could you explain undesirable events, tragic events, if you're living in a world where a Yid fort kemel nicht allein, a Jew never travels alone? These are kashas that on a philosophical level can be explained, on a personal and a human level are inexplicable, impossible to explain. I'm not trying to bring out the downside. I'm trying to bring out the upside. That by big tzaddikim, these inyonim, these ideas of shluchim mitzvah and nizaykin, their physical safety is bepashtus. Is literal and actual on the physical level and so forth. The closer you are to God, the closer God is to you. Fanagmore, it's not mamish the same idea, but it's a similar idea. The Gemara says that Nachum ish Gamzu was a very, very sick man. He was laying in a bed. He was immobile. He couldn't move. And he was living in a churv. He was living in a shack that was in terrible condition. And it looked like it was going to collapse. So they came to him, Nachum ish Gamzu, and they said to him, we want to move you. He says, wait. He says, empty the house first. Take everything out. Furniture, pots, pans, clothing, everything. And then you'll remove my body. His bed. So they listened to him. Chachamim, they listened to him. Anyway, they emptied the house, and when it was all bare, they picked up his bed, 2 talmidim. They carried him out. As soon as he stepped across the threshold, the house collapsed. It's an asur for a person to put himself into a makam sakana. You're not allowed to go next to a kesar or you're not allowed to put yourself in a dangerous situation. How does he go ahead and do that? And apparently the answer is that the closer you are to God, the closer God is to you. Why am I saying this? I am saying this because this is our third shiur on this Maamar. And in this third shiur, a new dimension is added. And that's the dimension of Torah and koyach HaTorah. The power of Torah and the holiness of Torah. In this Maamar, in this shtickle, which we're going to be learning this evening with Hashem's help, the discussion about Torah is clearly not about the wisdom of God Almighty, but the Ein Sof, how in the Torah is the Eibishter himself. And Yidden who learn Torah on the highest levels. Which doesn't mean Yidden who learn the most Torah, but Yidden who learn Torah with the biggest dveikus, with the biggest bittul, like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. When you have Torah on this madrege, you live in the Torah's reality. And when you live in the Torah's reality, everything about you is very, very different. So I'm setting us up for this shmuas, that although we said that every Yid could experience the Gilui Elokus of his mitzvahs through Simcha Shel Mitzvah, and I'm going to explain momentarily, I'm going to repeat again what this means from the previous classes, but it's not so simple. There's verschiedene madreges. There's madreges. But let me share a few more thoughts before we get to the Maamar. I think it's the Belzer Rebbe or the Gerer Rebbe, but I don't remember which, who was visited by a Chassid. This Chassid was a big Lamden, big Talmid Chacham. And his Rebbe asks him, "Was tust du? What do you do?" So he told his Rebbe, "Ich lerne a bissel Torah." I try to learn a little bit of Torah. So his Rebbe said in response, "Das ist richtig. Weil wie viel Torah man lernt into the Salamal a bissel." It's correct to say you learn a little Torah because no matter how much Torah you learn, it's always going to be a little bit. Why? Because Torah is Ein Sof, Torah is infinite. What we learn, what we gather is seichel, is intellectual. All the intellect in the world does not come anywhere near the Ein Sof, which is the Torah. As much Torah as you learn, it's always going to be a little bit. But when you say that as much Torah as you learn, it's always going to be a little bit, doesn't mean the nigla of the Torah, it doesn't mean the chochmas ha-Torah, it means the yoyah, the Ein Sof. Because Torah is Ein Sof, there's an infinite number of different ways of bringing down from that Ein Sof into seichel. We know about the Helika Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov used to keep on his table a Zohar. People used to come into the Holy Baal Shem Tov for eitzes, for adracha, and the Baal Shem Tov would open up the Sefer HaZayar, and he would answer them. I think there's even stories where he showed people inside their name and the tshuva to their shaila. So somebody said to Hilka Baal Shem Tov, excuse me, everybody has a Zayar, but not everybody can read it. Not everybody looks in the Zayar and has answers to everybody's questions. So the Holy Baal Shem Tov said that the Chazal tell us that when the Eibishter created the world, there was Eir, Sheniv, Rabbi Marishan, the light of the first day. Which was Adam Rishon Mistakel Beim Seifei Elam Vat Seifei. This light allowed you to see from one edge of the world to the next. And the Eibishter saw Ein HaOlam Kedaihu Lei. The world is not worthy of such a light. So Gunza, he hid it away. There's different questions where he hid it, different shitas, different opinions where it was hidden. And one of those opinions is Gunza B'Teir. It's hidden in the Teir. So the Baal Shem Tov Taich, those who have Zakir Eis, those who have pure eyes, can see that Oyer, which was created on the first day, that Adam Rishon was able to see from one end of the world to the next. And with this oil, with this lichtigkeit, the Baal Shem Tov was able to answer people's questions of all different types and so forth. This is the Taich Torah, but not the Chochmas HaTorah, the Ein Sof, the godliness of the Torah. One last word on this line, if you will. And I'm sure I've told the story to you before. I recall telling you the story. That Shavuos in Lubavitch was called Chag HaMatzos. Shavuos in Lubavitch was called the holiday of matzos. But matzos did not mean unleavened bread. Matzos meant rabbis, Meir Tzedek. Because all the Rosh Rabbanim, the Chassidim, would come to Tzemach Tzedek for Shavuos in Lubavitch. It was an unbelievable covet for the Rebbe. It was a very beautiful scene to see the Gedolei Rabbanim of Russia, Lubavitch Chassidim. On one Shavuos, by one of the meals which the Rabbanim was sitting with the Rebbe, somebody asked the Rebbe, when the Yam Suf split, what was Moshe Rabbeinu doing? When the sea split, what was Moshe Rabbeinu doing? And the Tzemach Tzedek answered, is given kalten brand. Kalten means hot ice, frozen still. Meaning to say, if you would look at Moshe Rabbeinu Har Sinai at the Kriyas Yam Suf, he stood like as if casual, nothing is going on. But inside there was an unbelievably strong fire. The fire was invisible on the outside, but underneath, inside, there was an incredibly intense fire. So intense, it was like hot ice. Of course, the point of the story is to say that Moshe Rabbeinu's access or tapping into godliness does not cause him to react. It causes him to go silent, to become stunned, to become completely one with the experience of the godliness, and he becomes like ice. This is called in Hebrew a dvekus, an attachedness, a cleaving of Moshe Rabbeinu with the Eir Eliki. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu experiences godliness not in a reactionary way, where he gets excited and jumps up and down, but he becomes drawn into it. And this is the koyach of Torah, as you'll see soon. Now let's get to the Maamar. Our Maamar has told us two things basically. Number one, anytime you learn Torah and do a mitzvah, you bring down Atzmos himself, the Eibishter himself. Number two, when you do a mitzvah and you reveal Atzmos himself, it's in a state of Helem. When you do a mitzvah with Simcha Shal Mitzvah, you do a mitzvah with joy, you can reveal the godliness of the mitzvah. When you do the mitzvah with joy, you experience the godliness of the mitzvah. Okay. That sounds to us, to me and to you, any person who wants to do a mitzvah with simcha is an experienced godliness. Today's shiur says not so simple. It's true, simcha shal mitzvah megal delakus, the atzmos of a mitzvah, but to truly reveal the essence of a mitzvah, so simcha shal mitzvah, you have to know who the mesameach is, who's rejoicing, what level of joy this person is on that allows him to do a mitzvah. And because of his joy, he's experiencing the godliness of the mitzvah. And today we're going to add the component of Moshe Rabbeinu, and we're going to add the component of Torah, which is higher than Aaron HaKohen and his Simcha Shal Mitzvah, which we've been discussing for the last 2 weeks. And look inside, line 95. Ach, Hakeach Lazeh. We need strength. Sheyesh l'Aaron, for Aaron. Lahales es hanefesh, that he should cause the neshama to rise up, mechutz laparechas, outside the curtain, outside the Holy of Holies. In other words, he finds himself in a place where godliness is not revealed. He's outside the curtain. He needs the joy to reveal godliness. And through the joy of the mitzvah, he reveals the godliness. Pardon me, outside the curtain. To reveal this love. And he should reveal the godliness of this love. Shehi bebechinas ein sof, which is ein sof. So you need help. Hinei. Then, and this Torah says, to effectively not just do a mitzvah and reveal atzmos, but to do a mitzvah with kavon and reveal atzmos, you need to have has to be something which is eternal, me'es b'nei Yisrael, from the Jewish people, and you'll see momentarily the focus in this line is the word me'es. In other words, it's not enough to do a mitzvah. It's not enough to do a mitzvah b'simcha, but it needs to be me'es. And as you'll see later, me'es goes on the Torah, and when a yid learns Torah on the highest of levels, that affects that his simcha shel mitzvah reveals the atzmos which is achieved through the behavioral performance of the mitzvah. And again, I want to stop and I want to have a conversation with you. Over the years, we have had ample opportunity, many opportunities, to talk about godliness, talk about Ein Sof, which is, of course, one of the cornerstones of Chochmas HaKabbalah, Elokus, Havaya, as they would call it, godliness. I've also told you that whenever Chassidus discusses godliness, it has to give examples, illustrations, metaphor, because none of us have ever met godliness. And as a rule, when you have in Chassidus a mashal for Ein Sof, there's two mashalim. One mashal is the mashal of will, and the other mashal is the mashal of delight. Ratzon and tainuk, will and pleasure. But each mashal is incomplete and requires other mashal for it to be complemented and made whole. Why do you use willpower as an example for Ein Sof? Simple. Because will is higher than reason. It represents the infinity of the person, as Torah is higher than reason. On the other hand, pleasure. In pleasure, you don't have force. In delight, you don't experience power. In delight, you experience richness. Many a student of mine has asked me, why is pleasure not an emotion? And in short, the answer is pleasure is not an emotion because it's not measured and limited. And because pleasure completely takes over a person. The entire person experiences pleasure. What is the expression that is employed to describe the effect of pleasure? It's nisala batzmusa, be raised up into your essence. And I've talked about this on a number of occasions earlier in our learning over the years. And in short, the issue is, we live in a body, in a physical earth, in a physical world, where everything is chassaron, everything is lacking. Nothing has everything. You're born, you have a brain, no knowledge. You have a heart, no feelings. You have senses, no sensitivities, and so forth. And you have to learn them. It's a world of chassaron. Okay, so you spend your time gathering stuff, gathering ideas, gathering feelings, gathering material property, whatever your fancy is. But you're constantly going out and getting stuff, and it's never going to be enough. You're always going to need and want more. That's the way the Eibishter made the world. But in the neshama which is higher than the guf, because it's one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's no lack. It has everything. So the neshama is in a state of peace. The neshama is in a state of trust. The neshama is in a state of humility because it has. We want because we're outside of the realm of the neshama. What is the experience of pleasure? The experience of pleasure is, for some reason, the neshama, the person is raised up into the level of the neshama called tainuk. When you're raised up at the neshama called level of the neshama called tainuk, you find yourself in that sphere of the neshama that has everything, that's rich, that's incredibly rich, and it gives you great satisfaction. That's why when a person experiences pleasure, there's a euphoria, there's a feeling of I can do anything, of an invincibility. Of course it passes and then you're stuck where you were. But a tainug elaki, a person does mitzvahs and has a pleasure, from Yiddishkeit they're experiencing the richness of the Ein Sof. So in these two examples for Ein Sof, of will and pleasure, will reveals the force, the drive, the thrust of the Ein Sof, and pleasure, delight, reveals the richness and the subtlety and the nuance of the Ein Sof. We've been talking a lot about simcha. We know from Chassidus that Simcha represents Gili. Simcha reveals. I'm sorry. This is true psychologically as well. Simcha reveals. But Simcha is constantly chasing the essence. Simcha is outside of the essence and it wants to connect. But then there's pleasure, delight. The pleasure is the essence. It's one with God. And the level of the neshama, which is tainug, is not running to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's at peace. It's at rest, so to speak. So the Rebbe is now going to qualify everything he's told us until this point in the Maamar. When we say that each time we do a mitzvah, Yamam Shechatzvos, and when we say we do a mitzvah with Simcha Shal Mitzvah, Yomagala Atzmos of Elokus. There's a third criteria. The Simcha Shal Mitzvah will reveal the Atzmos of Elokus we do to a mitzvah, provided that you're the kind of person that's holding on a madrega of Tainug Eliki. It's holding on a madrega of Torah. And although we'd like to say that it means every Jew, you'll see in this Maamar it means Jews like the Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, like the Rebbe Rashab, who says it's impossible, I should do a mitzvah, and as a result of this I should come Hepech HaChayim, because Shluchei mitzvah einen ezekin. It can't come from a davar teiv, a davar rav. If he was a machnas erech for the krem and sugar rav, it was impossible from this should come a davar leiteiv, something which is negative, something which is not positive. And this becomes the third link in the chain. And you would say it backwards, you have Torah. Torah is the delight of connectedness to godliness, which is not a tumult. From that comes joy, simcha, which is the revealed presence of that attachedness. And the simcha reveals the godliness that's found in the physical mitzvahs that you perform. And this is tonight's class. So far we talked about Aron HaKein. And Aron HaKein is about loving Jews, revealing their neshamas, and the joy of doing a mitzvah. That's what Aron HaKein is about. And the joy of doing a mitzvah reveals the godliness, as we discussed last week and especially the week before last. But not in every Jew is it fully revealed. What is the prerequisite? What would be a requirement before that should cause the godliness to be revealed and to be the way it's supposed to be? Is there's also Torah. Torah in this case doesn't mean more chokhmah. Torah means dveikes and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we'll continue to read on line 96. So it says in the second pasuk, Me'es b'nei Yisrael, Pirush interprets the Alter Rebbe Me'es. The word Me'es, which is written in the second pasuk of this sequence of psukim, which is about Aron HaKein and Moshe Rabbeinu and oil, and lighting up Yiddish neshamas with the joy of doing a mitzvah, which reveals godliness. So it says in these two psukim that one of the things necessary in revealing this godliness is me'es. What is the meaning of the word me'es? Hainu be'bechines eisias hatera. Eis is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, aleph till tov. The hainu, this means that although we made it seem like there's only two requirements, do a mitzvah and have joy, you reveal atzmos, says the Rebbe, not so pashut. In addition, you have to have the learning of Torah, which is going to be, as I explained to you in my own language, set up the tainug, which is going to be the basis for the ratzon, which is the megala, the lokus of the mitzvah. Sha'adam leimed, when a yid learns Torah, umeisim libe v'nafshei b'esias, and he doesn't simply learn the Torah, he invests all of himself in understanding the Torah correctly. Shemedaber behem b'dechilu u'rechimu, he speaks the Torah with passion, with love and fear. Now all of us understand that when you're learning Torah intellectually, you can't be emotional, there's no greater conflict. So here, the chilu rachim, it doesn't mean that the intellect is being challenged by emotion. This is a person whose level of Torah is such a high madrege that whatever it is that he's doing is full of fire. She'es, yes, elu, these letters of the Torah. As he recites them, Yeseidos, and Baharei Kedesh Chochmei, they come from the level of Chochmah. Lochein, and as a result, since the Torah comes from Chochmah, HaTorah, Torah becomes the light. Shehi Me'iras Haner, which causes the candle to shine. Like it says in Chassidishe Parshah, mitzvahs are compared to candle. For Torah, and Torah is compared to light. And there's many interpretations into what those words mean, but the basic interpretation is that ner means the shemen upsila. The candle means he clearly ate a Torah, I read inside on line 99, is a vessel for the light of the Torah. V'ha-Torah, he ate, the Torah is the light which the vessel illuminates, which the vessel reveals and preserves. V'chayes ha-mitzvahs. And when a person learns Torah, they're providing the fire which is going to be manifest on the mitzvahs, which is the vessels. It says the Rebbe v'hein, and this becomes the third component. In addition to doing the mitzvah, which we're now learning is a candle, and in addition to the joy of the mitzvah, which is revealing the candle, you have to have the Torah. V'hein hagermes, this Torah, which provides the light, causes lihiyes keach la'aron, for Aaron to have this strength, lihiyes shushvin, to be the accompanier, to bring us in, like we discussed 2 weeks ago in the class, that's what tzaddikim do. They bring us into proximity to Elokus, lahamshich, to draw down eir v'giloi ha'ava b'nefesh adam, to bring down into a person's soul a revelation of love. For liyes ba eira v'simcha shel mitzvah, this love should include the joy of mitzvahs. And when you have the Torah, and the light that the Torah provides, or as I would like to use the term, the delight, the tainuk, the atzmos of Elokus that the Torah provides, this allows that the simcha shel mitzvah should reveal the godliness of a mitzvah. And this becomes the new idea here. Aaron is outside the curtain, michutz lapareches, we discussed last week. And therefore he's revealing the godliness in the form of simcha. But he has to get a koyach from inside the pareches. And the koyach that he gets from inside the pareches is not his, it's from the Torah, which you'll see momentarily is Moshe Rabbeinu. And the Rebbe says something very, very disturbing, to use the same word I used before. As opposed to the simple person, that because he lacks chokhmah, the Chazal tell us, and Amaris cannot be a chassid. What is the meaning of the words v'lei Amaris chassid? He cannot do a mitzvah and experience the godliness of the mitzvah through the joy of the mitzvah, not because he doesn't have joy, but because he doesn't have Torah. Now you and I are going to say, okay, well, I'm not an Amaritz. I can read Gemara with Rashi. I can certainly read Gemara with Schattenstein. Yeah. But over here, Amaritz and Talmud Chacham doesn't think what you think it means. Amaritz and Talmud Chacham means privy to the godliness of Torah and not privy to the godliness of Torah. And in this respect, most people are Amaratzim. In other words, you have to understand this Maamar more spiritually than literally. In other words, the idea of revealing the Atzmos of Elokus through Simcha Shel Mitzvah is really for very, very special people. Says the Rebbe, in addition, or however, in other words, now that we added that you need to have the Torah as the basis for revealing godliness with Simcha Shel Mitzvah, you have to add one more point. That to bring this Torah Lamata B'Yisrael to the Jewish people, it requires the Madrega of Moshe Rabbeinu. And if we speak of Aaron HaKohen as being outside the curtain, and therefore he draws the koyach of the Torah from inside the curtain, and manifests it outside the curtain in the form of joy, Moshe Rabbeinu was inside. So it tells us on the Pasuk Ma Yisin L'Adam B'Chol HaMolei Sheyamol Tachas HaShemesh. What's outstanding about a human being in all of his efforts that he's doing underneath the sun? And of course, underneath the sun, nothing is new. And if there's nothing new, there's nothing novel about anything that we do. And the Zayad answers, there is something a person can do in this world that although it's Tachas HaShemesh, is novel. And what is that? Shani Amal Torah. The toil of Torah is different. The Hila Elam and Shimshon, because it comes from higher than the sun. We live in this world, and as a result, we're underneath the heavens, underneath the sun. And Ein Kol Chodesh Tachas HaShemesh, nothing is new under the sun. But the Torah we learn even down here is higher than the sun. Visham, and higher than the sun. Who Madregas Moshe's level of Moshe Rabbeinu? What is the Madreg of Moshe Rabbeinu? Kvad Pevach Ad Lashon V'cholu, a hard mouth and a hard tongue, etc. Now, this means we once learned years ago the Maimon Teir and Shmais Misam Pella Adam. That means he cannot speak. Simcha is Gilui. Joy is revelation. Revelation is speech. That's outside of the curtain. That's underneath the sun. But higher than the sun, which is the true source of the Torah, this is Madreg of Moshe Rabbeinu. It's higher than speech, meaning to say it's higher than revelation. This is not the level of godliness which can be manifest through joy and will. This is a level of godliness which one is raised up into and experiences in a subtle and a sublime way. This is the godliness of pleasure. Because Torah is different than mitzvahs in the Simcha Shal Mitzvah. In the Torah. And in experiencing the godliness that's within the Torah. The Taina Galaki, there's no joy of the mitzvah. Why? Because joy of mitzvahs may be an expression of godliness, but the heart is racing. The joy is a manifest. It's revealed because it's michutz lapareches, it's outside the curtain. And because a person finds himself, to use the aforementioned illusion, underneath the sun, outside the curtain, his relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is like will running for something which is beyond him. And in this simcha he reveals godliness. While Torah, in Torah, there is a settling. Not a settling, a calming down and a quieting, but to the contrary, being one with Atzmos. Like I explained to you the story with the Rabbi Tzemach Tzedek, who said that Moshe Rabbeinu, when the sea was split, was like hot ice. He stood like a motionless statue, a statue of marble, and he was in a dveikus with Elokus. That's not Ratzu, that's Shuv. And you should know that there is a Ribui Sipurim, particularly about the Mittel Rebbe. At the middle, Rebbe would have such a dveikus where he was completely motionless. It's brought down from Chassidim. And I frankly forget where I saw it, but I saw it in print. That at the middle, Rebbe had a gabbai who was a nar, a fool. And he didn't have any sensitivity. And people would pay him money. And he would bring them in to watch the middle Rebbe mitten davening. Middle Rebbe davening. He would stand in the middle of the room, completely motionless. And the shamash would bring the people in, and he would pick up the Rebbe under the arms and turn him around, and they would look at him. And then he would pick him up, turn it back around. The middle of the Rebbe had no idea. He was totally not here. This is not ratzu. This is not running to Elokus. This is dveikus. This is one with Elokus. That's not simcha. Shel mitzvah, this is the eira Torah, the delight, the godliness of Torah, which is the source, which is the basis for revealing the godliness through the joy of the mitzvah, in quotes, outside the curtain, underneath the sun. Shaydei ha-Torah, through the Torah, hogili chudi yizbarech, it reveals the unity of God Almighty. In other words, oneness with Him, lamata kamei lamayla, that down here on this earth, it's exactly as it is on high. Ayadei ha-Torah, through the Torah, because He dvarad Hashem mamish, Torah is mamish, the word of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when a Yid learns the Torah, he's experiencing that oneness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu consciously and actually. And like I said to you before, in spiritual terms, every single Jew experiences this when he learns Torah. In practical terms, a Yid like the Rebbe Rashab experiences this b'peil. And he brings the famous Chassidishe idea, as the pasuk says, my words that I have placed in your mouth. My words, mamish, and Yom Chazal tells Masnita Malkisa. A Mishnah is like a king, Kemelech Atzmei, like the king himself. Shem is Ached, and Varad Hashem Zu Halacha, which is one with the halacha that the person is learning. Shehei Hapsak Kach, that when the person is learning the Mishnah, the psak is going to be so, Ki'ilu Hapsak Hazeh Yetzei Mipi Atzmei, as if this psak din is coming from the Eibishter's mouth. Now, of course, this idea of Dvorei Asher Samti Beficha is a concept which you have in many Maimorim with Alter Rebbe, which is the idea of Tan L'Sheni Imrasecha Ke'eni Acher HaKedei. That's the pasuk in Tilim. Tan L'Sheni Imrasecha Ke'eni Acher HaKedei. There's also, it's brought down in the name of the Magid Meshorim from the Beth Yosef. Ani HaMishnah Medaberes Beficha. In other words, both in Torah Shebeksav and in Torah Shebal Peh, you have this idea. What's the idea? The idea is that normally we say, for most people, we say, Kol HaKedei V'Sheina HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kedei V'Sheina Kenegdei. You learn Mikra, you learn Mishnah, you learn Torah Shebeksav, you learn Torah Shebal Peh. Hashem relearns with you. Hashem is your chavrusa, so to speak. He responds to you. But you're the Kedei and the Sheina, you're learning first, and He's reacting to you in a different way, but along the same lines. This is the idea of when you say a shmua, a teira, in the name of Tanaim and Amirayim, Sefseis of Deva Vizbakover, he learns with you, but you're learning and he's learning with you. But that's the lower level. What's the higher level? And this lower level, of course, is when you're outside the pareches, when you're b'lamatam and shimsha. You're learning Teira in this world, and the Eibush is responding to your learning. But there's a higher madrege. And the higher madrege involves an incredible unity with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Rebbe is going to use the word bittul later, soon. And when a Yid is learning Torah on the highest madreges, you don't say he learned Torah and Hashem responds, but exactly the opposite. Hashem is learning and he's repeating after the Eibishter. Now, of course, Hashem is learning and he's repeating after the Eibishter because he's learning. In other words, the Yid learns Torah, but because he's so batal talakus, the godliness of the Torah is preceding his learning. Chronologically, in fact, he's learning Torah and Hashem is learning with him. But spiritually speaking, the koyach of his Torah is coming from the Eibishter first, and then it's coming from him. In other words, when a person is learning Torah on the highest madreges, it's not he's learning Torah and Hashem is learning Torah with him. Because Hashem is in him, the Torah of Hashem is being learned through him, as if Hashem is learning the Torah first. As though you're repeating after the Eibishter. And again, on this madrega also, you're learning Torah and Hashem is with you. But it's not that you're, so to speak, bringing the Eibishter here. You're so bottled to Hashem, but as you learn, Hashem is learning through you. And this is the madrega of Torah that he calls shuv. When you learn Torah in such a madrega, you're not running any place. You have the Eibishter inside of you. It's a tainag alaki. Says the Alter Rebbe v'hainu, and this is Maila, so madregas me. What level is this? A person sheteirosiyam nasitei his vocation, k'mei Rashbi v'chavera, Reb Shimon bar Yochai and his chavera. And of course, you know what the Gemara says, that Reb Shimon bar Yochai was a teirosiyam nasi. Teira was his vocation. And we know that a person whose parnasa is teira, doesn't work, doesn't make a living. Melachtei nasa sayedei achedim, other people make parnasa for him. And the Gemara also says, Harbi Aslu Kerashbi, will also be other. Many people tried with Reb Shimon bar Yochai, tried and it wasn't successful. In other words, you have Yidden who learn Torah 24 hours a day, learn Torah 18 hours a day. It's not necessarily true that they automatically have Parnasa. Because to have Parnasa from learning Torah, you have to learn Torah like Rashbi learned Torah, with such a madrega of bittul that it's Eisim, it's Einishal Mokim, it's Bechol Meidecha, then it's Melachtacha Nasai De Achedim. In other words, when you learn these Gemaras, bepashtet, you think you learn Torah, Hashem is going to feed you. And on a certain level, it's true. But the idea that if you learn Torah, Hashem feeds you in such a way that you literally see breakfast delivered to you as you're learning, this is not a Pashat Madrege. This is a very high Madrege. This is the Madrege of Shimon bar Yochai. Shimon bar Yochai learns Torah in such a Madrege that he's so bottled to Lakus, that a Lakus is speaking through him, so then it's Torah Sayam Nasi. And the Rebbe says in parentheses, Sholachin P'turim and Tefillah, which is why people who are Terasiyam Nasi Pata from davening, Shat Tefillah, Bechin is Bittul B'shtach is the whole point of davening, is to become Batal TaKadosh Baruch Hu, V'amshoch Aserin Seiv Baruch Hu, and bringing down godliness, says the Alter Rebbe, Nimshoch Esad Eisek HaTeira Gamke, just like a person who davens, is Batal to Hashem and consequently brings down godliness. This level of learning Torah has the bittul and brings down godliness. Not everybody who learns Torah has a bittul. And not everybody who learns Torah has a bittul and therefore brings down godliness. So you have to daven. But on the Madreg of Shimon bar Yochai, the Torah itself brings down this godliness. As Shimon bar Yochai said, Bechad ketiri, with one knot. It's katan nachule, I can tie myself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Alter Rebbe interprets what is this not. Shubachin is bittul, but in say Baruch Hu Mamish, this is Reb Shimon bar Yochai is utter bittul tein sof. On the level of Yechudei Allah, he was one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kvayachu from the Eibishter's perspective of unity. And in Reb Shimon bar Yochai, there is, in his learning, a tainug alaki, a godly delight, which is inside the curtain, higher than the pareches, and that Torah is the source of the revealing atmos of Alakus and the simcha shel mitzvah michutz la pareches. This is the pshat that Torah is equal to all the mitzvahs. When is Torah equal to all the mitzvahs? When from the Torah alone you have bittul, from the Torah alone you have gili Alakus, and you don't have to have the mitzvahs, right? Tefillah, davening is bittul from the bottom up. Mitzvahs as a rule are kelim, the vessels that bring godliness down. When a yid learns Torah, this madrega of bittul, the godliness comes down without the vessels of the mitzvahs, and that's why Talmud Torah can get klum. It's equal to all of the mitzvahs. So it turns out that on an ideal level, on a lachatchiladika level, so to speak, what we learned last week and 2 weeks ago, that when a yid does a mitzvah with joy, the mitzvah brings him the Eibishter himself, and the joy of the mitzvah reveals the Eibishter himself. There's another component. In order for the joy of the mitzvah to reveal the Eibishter himself in this world, you have to have also Torah, because Torah is the Eibishter. And when you have the Torah and you have the Eibishter, then the Simcha Shel Mitzvah reveals the Eibishter, the Torah, through the performance of the mitzvah. But this is not stam, a simple level of learning Torah. This is an incredibly high level of learning Torah. And he continues on line 112. V'hine, Kedei she'yagil lebechinas hamadregas bittul zeh. Now that we understand that a mitzvah and a simcha shel mitzvah is not going to be sufficient. You have to have also Torah. But Torah on a level of dvekas nelakus, tainegalaki, with total bittul. So the question becomes, how does one reach this madrega of bittul? And the answer is, v'yikchu elecha shemen zayizach. You should bring to you, to Moshe Rabbeinu, pure olive oil. Now there's 2 points. One is the fact that it's olive oil, and the other that it's brought to Moshe Rabbeinu. So Moshe Rabbeinu is going to be discussed on line 118, which is in the next paragraph. In this paragraph, we talk about Chochmah. And it's very interesting. The way he explains Chochmah to me is very interesting. It's very interesting, because L'chei Torah is higher than Bereshis. He says, what does it mean? If a person wants this madrega of bittul, it's through Shem and Zayizach, which is madrega of Chochmah. What does that mean? The wisdom to see God in the creation. What makes a person wise? Yes, Anela, if he sees what's going to happen tomorrow. Anel means what's going to happen tomorrow. But Chassidus interprets Anel, he sees what's happening this moment that's being reborn. Hainu, Hanelad, what is being reborn? Meyayin Leyesh, the world is coming to existence. From a non-existential state into an actual state. Like it says in this Sidra Machadish, Betuvi Hashem renews with His goodness b'chol yom, every day, Talmud, every instant, Ma'aseh Bereishis b'chol, the event of creation. In other words, Ki Haisav was Meyayin Li'esh, the idea that Hashem creates the world from non-existence into existence. Who Talmud has to happen all the time. It's constantly renewed. Why? Because it's dependent and not real. V'hainu lefi. What is the reason for this? Because it's dependent and not real. Ani Havaya Nisi, the truth of HaKadosh Baruch Hu was not in the world, because He hasn't changed. When Hashem creates the world, as far as Hashem is concerned, no change takes place. The process that produces a world and a yesh, is a light or a trace or a ray, which comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This ray, which comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, needs to be renewed all the time, because it's dependent upon Him and it's not Him. This ray, which comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, created which man has to be constantly renewed. Tamid, it shouldn't become nullified in its form altogether. So, if the investment in God in creation is not God but only a light, and therefore is dependent upon, must be renewed. So if the godly investment in creation needs to be renewed, the creation itself must be renewed. When you tune into the fact that although the world seems so permanent, in fact, the world is being renewed every instant, that the godliness that's invested in this world also needs to be revealed every second, this arouses in a person this incredible bittul. In other words, when you see Yesh Mayayin, you look at the world and don't see the world, but you see that the Eibush is creating it every instant, this creates a vulnerability and a dependency which bittles you to Hashem, that allows your Torah to reveal godliness. And when a person affects that part of his spirit ascends upward, it causes a spirit to create it on high and a spirit to be brought back down below, which means that bittul ein seif baruch hu mamish. This affects a bittul of the person to Lakus, and therefore godliness can be revealed mamish al nafsha, and his nafesh, basic Torah was learning Torah v'chulu, and so forth and so on. This bittul opens the person up to not simply learning Torah, but learning Torah on a level where he's experiencing the Ein Sof, the godliness. And again, to me it's interesting that he couldn't find a higher bittul than the bittul of Yesh Me'ayin. There's much higher madregas of bittul. And that's how he translates the words. It goes on chokhmah, the chokhmah of looking at the world and not seeing a world, but seeing godliness. And then he continues, V'zehu, and this is also Veata Tetzaveh b'nei Yisrael, that Moshe Rabbeinu was the one who commands the Jewish people to bring the chokhmah, to bring the shemen. Tetzaveh is lashon tzavsa v'yiskashos. The word tzaveh means to connect. And the idea that a yid could connect to this bittul is aydei v'khu elecha. But you bring it first to Moshe Rabbeinu. That the shemen zay yizach lebechinas Moshe tchila. You bring the olive oil to Moshe Rabbeinu. In other words, you recognize that the ability to bring godliness into this world is rooted in Moshe Rabbeinu. Because Moshe Rabbeinu is inside the curtain, the Moshe Rabbeinu represents the Torah and godliness. And from recognizing that the source of the Torah is Moshe Rabbeinu, it brings down the yes chukas eila miyes b'nei Yisrael. It brings the Torah to us. The yes eis is the Torah. We should have the letters of the Torah. And when a yid is able to learn the Torah, which he gets from Moshe Rabbeinu, it causes shiarech Aaron, and then Aaron should arrange the candles and then light up the candles, which is bechina simcha shal mitzvah, the joy of the mitzvah. Machmas, because ki eisi es ha-Torah, the Torah, hein hanimshachas b'chinas Moshe, comes from Moshe Rabbeinu, and Veata Tetzaveh b'nei Yisrael, Moshe Rabbeinu gives the koyach of the Torah to reveal the Torah as the basis for the simcha shal mitzvah. Stop. So how does it work? Moshe Rabbeinu is the source of the Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu is inside the curtain. Moshe Rabbeinu is not joyous. Moshe Rabbeinu is quiet. But this quiescence is the greatest connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Moshe Rabbeinu is the source of the Torah. So the Pasuk tells you have to access Moshe Rabbeinu, bring down the source of the Torah, to empower Aaron HaKohen to bring joy or to reveal the godliness of the mitzvahs that we perform. What about Aaron HaKohen himself? Line 121, Vehine, Bechinas Aaron, the level of Aaron, Shu Bechinas Rotzlipcha. Aaron is not one with Hashem like Moshe Rabbeinu. He's like Rotzen as opposed to like Tainug, because he's outside of the curtain. So by Aaron HaKohen Ksiv, it is written Me'erev ad Beker, from night until morning, and the Rebbe interprets this to mean Bereisha Chashecha V'hoda Neher. In the world of Aaron HaKohen, there's darkness and then there's light. You're outside the curtain, so you don't have and then you have. Ava b'chinas Moshe, the level of Moshe Rabbeinu, shu b'chinas shuv liyachad, which is the idea of being one with Hashem. Ve'gilu yichudei yizbarach, and reveal the unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. B'chinas yichudei on the highest levels. I'm sorry, ksiv by Moshe Rabbeinu, it's written lahalas ner tama, that the candle burns constantly. In other words, shu gilu yichud el, it reveals a unity from on high, shalamayla me'azman, which doesn't know time. The most dark and the most illuminated circumstances are equal. It unifies and equalizes everything. So let's stop. Let's finish the shir by reading the psukim. Right? Let's read the psukim. Let's read the psukim inside. In general, we know that we have 3 steps in revealing godliness, if you will, before Mashiach comes to performing a mitzvah. You have to do the mitzvah. You have to do the simcha shel mitzvah. But the simcha shel mitzvah has to be connected to the Torah for it to be effective, right? So this is how you read the pasuk, and I'll try my best to read it because it's kind of complicated. Now, of course, we're all in the Veata Tetzaveh of the Rebbe's spirit. The Rebbe's Maamar Veata Tetzaveh from Nun Beis, and in fact, some of the details of this Maamar are clearly the source of the Rebbe's Veata Tetzaveh, the Me'erev ad Beker and the Tamid and the Moshe and Aaron. But the Rebbe's Maamar is quite different, because in the Rebbe's Maamar he talks about Amunah. And this Maamar talks about Gili Elikus. There's a very big difference between those two things. But let's read the Psuk. Veata Tetzaveh b'nei Yisrael. You have to empower the Jewish people. That they should bring to you, in other words, they should come to Moshe Rabbeinu. They should acknowledge the need for Moshe Rabbeinu and the Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu provides. And the Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu provides is godliness on the level of Shuv. It's one with HaKadosh Baruch Hu inside the purpose. Shemen Zayezoch, what allows people to recognize this need for Moshe Rabbeinu is the bittul that of the chokhmah from recognizing yesh meyayin. Kosses lamoir, Amar does not interpret. Lahalas ner tomid. And when you look at the world and you don't see the world, but you see the yesh meyayin, you see the Eibishter, and this bittul brings you into the sphere of Moshe Rabbeinu, the fire that burns is tomid. It's constant. There's no day, there's no night, there's no golos, no gula. Moshe Rabbeinu's fire is inside the curtain. Moshe Rabbeinu's fire is above the sun. The godliness of Moshe Rabbeinu knows no distinctions of time. Yeah. But when you draw from that Torah into the tent of meeting outside of the curtain, in other words, underneath the sun, outside of the curtain, which is already the sphere of Aron HaKein, Asher HaLeidus, now we say Yarach Aaron. Aaron HaKohen is going to arrange the candles. And as the Rebbe said earlier in the Maamar, you have to arrange the candles, that's one madrege. And then you have to light up the candles, which is the second madrege. And now we say, Me'erev Beike, from night until morning. Since you're outside the curtain it's dark, and you have to use the koyach that you got from the Torah, from Moshe Rabbeinu, from inside the curtain, outside the curtain to change night into day. Lifnei Adeshem. And then the pasuk concludes, Chukas El Mederes, and this is always possible, Me'es B'nei Yisrael, because every Yid has Torah. Me'es means the Aleph and Taf of Torah. The Eibush gave us the Torah which we got from Moshe Rabbeinu. And because there's the Me'es B'nei Yisrael, Yidden have the Torah which they got from Moshe Rabbeinu, so Chukas El, at any time, a person can draw from that koyach of the Torah which Moshe Rabbeinu gave us, that outside the curtain, we should have from Aaron HaKohen the koyach for Simcha Shel Mitzvah.